Thank you, Bob, for your remarks and for kicking off the War Horse Symposium. Your contributions to journalism and our country will inspire reporters and public servants for years to come. I'm now going to introduce our next speaker, Ron Nixon, who's a fellow Marine grunt and one of the most respected leaders and veterans in media today. For years, Ron has been unwavering in his pursuit of exposing injustices and defending people susceptible of being taken advantage of. During his career in public service, Ron has worked in local and national newsrooms that have ranged from the Roanoke Times to the New York Times, and he currently serves the Vice President of News and Head of Investigations for the Associated Press. Ron has dedicated his career to forging dynamic teams that publish impactful reporting. He oversaw investigations that won several national and international awards, including a Pulitzer finalist in investigative reporting. And in 2021, he was named the News Leader of the Year by the News Leaders Association. And now, I'll welcome Ron to the stage to share a bit of his own story and explain why military reporting is a public service. Ron?
Thank you, Tom. Good morning, everyone. It's really good to be here, and I'm a little blinded, so I can't see you all because of the lights. So first of all, let me thank Thomas, Brennan, and the War Horse, the Harris School, and Provost Baker, Dave LePan, who issued the formal invite for me to come here. I also want to thank all of those folks here who are both active duty members of the military as well as veterans of the military. Thank you for your service. And I also will just say, totally in the interest of transparency, both Dave LePan, Thomas, and I are all Marines, but they outranked me, so I am here. I was ordered here, so I'm reporting for duty. I had no choice but to be here. With that being said, it is an honor to be here today to talk about this important topic. I went into the military back in 1988. I know it's a long time ago for a lot of folks here. But when I went into the military, a lot was different than in both how we view veterans, the people in journalism who were veterans, and coverage of military. Newspapers were pretty robust back then, and they were huge Sunday papers that were like just massive pieces of paper that had a bunch of advertising in them. And it was one of the many ways that people actually got their news. Most of those newspapers had people covering the military. They were knowledgeable about the military, and many of them were actual veterans. When I started in journalism the year prior to joining the U.S. Marine Corps, my publisher of the small Black-owned newspaper that I started at, ironically called Black News, was Isaac Washington, who was a veteran of the U.S. Marine Corps. My editor, Mr. Zach Weston, was a veteran, World War II veteran of the U.S. Navy. So we had people in the newsroom then who were linked to those prior wars, but who were also veterans and understood coverage of the military, what the do's and don'ts of covering things. I'll talk about that a little bit soon. This is also a different time. And so there was no internet. Young people, I know that's hard to believe, right? Like there was no internet, right? There were no smartphones, so you had to go and use payphones. So payphones are these things, it's like a cell phone, but it's in a wall or a booth, and you actually have to put money into it. I mean, I know that's hard to believe. And your comment section was the US mail. And young people, a mail is like this paper thing that you put like a stamp, which is a little sticky thing, and you put it in a box and the government delivers it. I know it's weird, but it's like comments. So But today, we're in a different environment, and those news organizations that were so robust back then, and just to be clear, they didn't always get it right, but they had people with the knowledge to be able to cover this, although they did not get it right. They've been decimated. The business model has changed. Advertising has migrated to the web. Some of it is bad business decisions. Let's be clear about that. So there are fewer staffers and resources to actually cover anything, in particular the military. And in addition to that, the number of veterans have declined in the newsroom. I think the number of veterans in the population as a whole, I believe, is less than 10%. I don't want to cite a number and be wrong and be fact-checked. And people saying, well, a vice president of the AP gave erroneous information. So let's just say I believe it's less than 10%. But in the actual media, it's actually less than that. So as a result of that, what you've got is a general lack of the military families and veterans, a lack of knowledge, rather, about military veterans, the military itself, and the veteran community. And it leads to some horrible examples of reporting, and I won't call any specific names of any media outlets, but I will cite some examples of some of the coverage that I've seen. Whenever there's a shooting or something involving a veteran, one of the first things that you see is that, well, they had military training. But what does that mean? If you're in food service, that's military training. If you're a journalist in the military, that's food service. I mean, that's military training. So what does that even mean when you say someone had military training? The other thing that I've seen a lot, particularly in instances like that, they will actually do a little background work, but they'll say that person was a marksman or that person was a sharpshooter in the military, which is totally meaningless. It's a badge. It means you qualified at the range. It means you shot at a target that didn't shoot back. So that's all that means. There's instances of stolen valor or simply people exaggerating their military service careers. And there aren't people to actually fact check that as a result of this general lack of knowledge in the newsroom and the lack of people actually covering the military. And I think one of the more important things here is something that Thomas has mentioned and others have mentioned, is that we have a huge military budget. And there's not a lot of coverage of that. And when there is coverage of it, it's sort of broad coverage without actually looking into the details of what that means. So this creates a general lack of awareness about the military for the general public, but also the news media as well. And one of the other things I would like to add too, is the military is not monolithic. Like people come into the military, you come into the military and you are who you are. I am from a little tiny community, I can't even call it a town, called Lauderdale, Mississippi. Population 370 people. I think we picked up 10 in the last census. So I think it's around 380, 385. Hey, listen, growth, right? We'll take it. I think it's around 385 about now, but that's me. But there are people who came in from Brooklyn. So the military is not monolithic. And even when you cover the military in terms of politics and what military veterans tend to be, this or that, you have to understand that people are individuals and you come into the military with certain things and you exit the military with certain things. So it's not a monolithic population. So those are some of the problems that we are facing in terms of coverage of the military, understanding veterans and veteran issues, and understanding issues about military families and what they go through. So I'm on the board of the Solutions Journalism Network, so I also like to offer solutions rather than just pointing out problems. So let me just lay out a couple of things that I think would help us better understand the military veterans and military families, and just raise a general awareness of the military overall. One is we need to get more veterans in journalism. There are a number of organizations working on this, in particular military veterans in journalism, of course, War Horse, but we need more. We need more people to bring more veterans into the military because you create a more robust coverage of the military. One that is not stereotypical, one is not based on the Rambo stereotype of the veteran who goes off and kills a bunch of people. And where was Rambo? Like Wisconsin or someplace like that? But anyway, no, it had mountains, so it couldn't be Wisconsin. Right? But that has been like the stereotype of military veterans or just military folks in general. But having more veterans in the newsroom will alleviate some of these problems. I'm not saying that just because you're a veteran that you will get everything right. For instance, I will be perfectly honest. I do not know much about the Air Force or Space Force or even the Army or Navy. I know the Marine Corps is part of the Department of Navy, but I just don't really know that much about the other services because I did not serve in those services. And I'm not just being a USMC snob. I literally just don't know. But I have an understanding, and I also know who to ask to answer those questions that I don't know about them. So that's solution number one, getting more veterans into the newsroom. Solutions number two is something that we've started at the Associated Press, and that is updating our style book to add more entries about the military as a whole. As many of you know, the AP style book is sometimes called the Bible of the industry because it has such an impact on writing and language. So in newspapers and even people outside of the industry use the AP style book. So by changing these entries or adding these entries, we are helping people across the industry understand terms about the military, ranks, the actual services themselves. Someone just wrote us the other day that, hey, Space Force is not in there. And I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. So the style book editor is adding the ranks of Space Force. Oh, and did I forget to mention the Space Force people? I'm sorry, Guardians. If I forgot to mention you, apologies and apologies. But we are adding the ranks of Space Force in there and an entry about what Space Force is and its mission. So I know that the Military Veterans and Journalists has also created a style guide as well that I would encourage you to go to their website and look at if you are covering the military or just want general knowledge about the military. The third thing is just basic training for journalists as a whole. We're never going to get like every veteran into the media or create a newsroom where we're going to have the kind of veterans or people with military service as we did before. You saw Bob Woodward on earlier. His editor during that time, Ben Bradley, the legendary editor of the Washington Post, was in the military. I mean, I'm not advocating for a draft, by the way, just FYI. But all of those people had knowledge about the military, and I think it led to better coverage back then. So those are some of the things that we can do. Those are some of the solutions that we can do to increase and have a more robust and better scope of coverage of the military families, and veterans. Now, this doesn't mean that we do flowery stories about the military or military spending or any of the other topics. We still have to hold people accountable. That's what journalism does, just as the public holds journalists accountable. We still have to hold the military accountable. So that means we still need to look at the things around military spending, and we still need to look at this kind of issues that the War Horse exposed with the pictures of the women Marines, or other issues that the military faces, racism in the military, gender discrimination in the military. We still have to cover those things, and we have to cover them through the lens of accountability. We need to look at the challenges faced by military families and make sure that that is front and center in the coverage and not be stereotypical about it. And we need to cover the plight of veterans. And not just, again, we are not in the habit of just doing so-called positive stories, but as we talk about the struggles that veterans face, we also need to point out the veterans like myself and Thomas and David and others who are in different positions, whatever the industries might be, because we do not want to create this Rambo, distressed veterans image that stereotypes veterans. And at the same time, we want to hold folks accountable for the plight of veterans. So in conclusion, I think that military coverage of the military is a public service. It is something that news organizations need to do, but we also need to find solutions to counter some of the things that are happening in the industry, such as the fewer and fewer people. There are newspapers that simply don't have staffers at all, or maybe they have one staffer that is charged with covering everything. So we have to do a better job of that. There are national news organizations like the Associated Press and the New York Times and others who are making a concerted effort to bolster the local media landscape. But it's still going to take the work from all of us to improve coverage of this important topic. I thank you for coming out today for this important event. I thank you for listening to me rant for a few minutes. I really am truly honored to be here today to talk about this. So thank you all, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the symposium.